It promised auto switch, which it was doing. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Welcome to OTJ, where we discuss you being promoted to a manager, not liking it and wanting to quit.
Yes, so many tech leads actually hate it after being promoted, and they miss their old nice job where they had their hands on their IDE and were still doing the programming and coding stuff, and now they are not allowed anymore. They do it anyway because they miss it and they don't like the leadership role because you need to make these nasty little decisions. And you need to only make these decisions, you need to make those decisions reality, which no one agrees you with. Yes, you are the leader and no one agrees with what you have to say. So that's a little bit nasty. So heavy is the crown, I would say.
I mean, and using the crown metaphor, it doesn't even have to be the top of the pyramid or the top of the hierarchy. It's enough that you're just feeling out of your depth and you're mostly dealing with people management and psychology rather than CPUs and architecture and the fun stuff. It's most engineering leaders basically have two complaints or two modes of operation to suffer from this problem. Number one, they complain about everything and they externalize everything as making it an opportunity problem or an environment problem. And number two, when they when they get to change something, they are, instead of changing things, thinking about quitting instead. That maybe this isn't for them. Those are the top two traps that I see engineering leaders find themselves in, struggle in, and sort of spiral out of control and then seek a way out.
I actually have it a lot. So with the people I work with is I want to quit, or I'm thinking of quitting next year. Not I want to quit, I want to quit next year. Or I think they quit me. It's a little bit like one of those two things is very common when it gets to software development and especially tech stuff. And I think that it's common because people don't really. So it is most often about the person itself. And I'm not mean here, and I'm not unfair or something like that. But most people who are promoted into that specific role were never fit for this role. So most, especially CTOs, most promotions I personally saw for people to CTO were IC senior to CTO, which is a huge step because from a IC coder to a business person leader. That is an entire different mindset you need to have, and probably one of the reasons why so many CTOs still code is
it's a different career as
it
well.
is.
Like it's
It
a
is.
completely different mode of operation. Like they're different set of hats, not just one hat.
Yeah, I was for 18 years or something like that CTO. It took me ages to get to the actual idea of what CTO is. I wasn't calling myself that, but it wasn't a role. Well, in Germany, we weren't used that term for most of the time. In recent 8-9 years, we started to use that, but it's essentially the same. But if you are a hands-on CTO, that is actually what we call engineering manager, because the CTO is a top of the funnel thing, right? So you are top of the pyramid, not the funnel.
So
I put me wrong.
I like using the. I heard it from Jonathan Stark. I don't know if it's coming from somebody else, but he kept using this analogy of when you're at that strategic level, especially in the C-suite, your job is to work on the business, not in the business.
Exactly. Yeah.
So your job is to make sure that if the culture is problematic, you change the culture. You try to figure out, okay, is culture determined by people? Is it by process? Is it by incentives? Which mix? Like, what are we? Is it the correct mix? And then introduce changes. And introducing changes usually ends up with firing people, hiring people, changing people, influencing people, convincing people, training people, talking to them, listening a lot, trying to understand them, trying to connect people, and resolving conflicts inside organizations. And where resistance kicks in for these leaders, especially first time first time promoted ICs, or even very senior tech leads who got promoted into staff or principal positions. So a very strictly non-managerial position. They're sort of going along that IC and then founding engineer or CTO trajectory. When it gets too much, they seek escape. Escape can be they want to close the business. Escape can be I want to sell it and make an exit. Escape can be I want to code and not deal with the strategic stuff. And escape can be I want to quit and join another company one level lower. Right. So, and it is usually this I want to quit and join a company one level lower, or I want to code. Right. So that they distract themselves with something that's urgent or something that could benefit from their expertise, but then they distract themselves, make themselves too busy to worry about those things that they're not very good at. And usually they get rewarded for it in some way, but it's not sustainable. It doesn't actually improve the. It doesn't introduce any kind of improvement or opportunities to improve the engineering culture or the business itself. Which one should we talk about first? Do you have a recent example of the I want to quit escape?
Well, I have a lot of examples there, to be honest. I think that in that core, it's nearly in every mentoring, even for seniors, is like everyone is taking the exit instead of actually solving the problems. And I think that it is the moment, and that is what I see recently, that is what I see on the long run. It is the moment when you see you are supposed to change something, but everything you do, everything you have prepared a lot. You have talked to a lot of people. You have talked to your peers, right? You have talked to HR. You have talked to outside stakeholders, but you haven't actually done the work with your own team, which you were supposed to do, because that is where the actual obstacle is. You, especially when you are promoted and you get into a landscape which isn't very well cultivated or was cultivated, which is very often the case because the software industry is full of non-cultivated cultures. So you basically inherit that, and then you basically do everything to avoid to make a change. You avoid to confront your own people. You avoid to challenge them. You avoid to be challenged. You don't really want to be the role model because you don't really know how. You think you might not have the credibility yet, which is an issue. You might have a vision, but you can't translate that into a mission. So something the people can actually understand and say, yeah, that's great, let's follow that. And even if you have that, you struggle to overcome the own ego, the own resistance, the own fears, the anxiety, the own saboteurs, to actually stand in front of the people and say, I lead now among you. And I think that's one of the issues. And what I see often is the first stages is a lot of one-on-ones. A one-on-one here, a one-on-one for everything. One-on-ones were never invented to lead an entire team all day long. They were invented for feedback meetings, for once a month things, right? Where we sit down, very high level, no day-to-day business. But for day-to-day business, you need to be amongst your people. You need to be one of them, next to them, not above them. You need to work alongside with them. The same CTO in small companies, the same as a team lead, for example. And that is what people actually avoid, right? That is what I see out there is connected with a huge resistance, with a huge fear of, I can't do that. I don't want to do that because some like me, some may, the fear of being rejected by their own people. That is often a sign of a very young leadership person who is in a leadership role, but is not really a leader yet, because it is not, the essence of leadership is there's a leader and there are followers. If no one is following what you say, you are not a leader. This is a simple thing. It's a physical problem.
Alex Hormozi has a great analogy to this, where if you're, and from he presented this metaphor that I remembered from like a pricing perspective of, he was coaching somebody who was charging 5K for a service where he could be charging 50K, right? So a 10x increase in price. And because they were that good, but they just never had the confidence to actually, alienate their current customer base and go higher. And he made a good point in coaching him, where he said, you need the belief in order to do the action, but it's the other way around. You need to do the action, try it, and the successful action, the result from the action, will help you build the belief so that next time it's easier, right? So it's more of this idea of the action is hard, and I would like a belief to confirm that the action is actually easy. It just appears hard. And these people want that before they do any action, right?
Mhm.
So it is more of this maturity event, this sort of hero's journey for any leader or tech lead or engineer to really embrace this idea that no, you just need to follow through with the actions, and if nobody stops you, or even better, if you get rewarded for it, then that is the belief is then built after the action,
Yes.
so that the next time you will just do it instinctively rather than even questioning whether you should do it, whether you should step in, whether you should call something out. Most engineers struggle when they come for coaching to me. What they struggle with is giving negative feedback. They have all these opinions about their people, their teams, their departments, their peers, how engineering and product interfacing, the relationships with the co-founders, with the board. They have all these opinions. It keeps them up at night.
Mhm.
But they never told them. They never told
Exactly.
them they think this about them, and they come with this guilt of, if I told them everything I think about them, they would quit, or they would think I'm stupid, or they would challenge me, or they would disrespect me. And they need this belief that they can just freely criticize people and everything will be okay. But of course, they are mixing up giving negative feedback correctly with giving negative feedback at all being seen as a negative. So they're looking for a scapegoat for, shouting at their people, or throwing a fit, or firing somebody silently, right? Because it's what I see being neglected the most, at least engineering leaders that seek coaching with me, is I have to direct them constantly towards correcting behavior, right? Improving behavior publicly, right? Somebody does something wrong, says something wrong in a meeting, suggests something dangerous, suggests something that is unhealthy, let's say, for the process, doing along the feature branch, or neglecting user feedback, or mistreating somebody's opinion from product, or whatever may have happened. And I tell them, and they're like, okay, no, I'll DM them, I'll message them. 2 hours later, it's like, I'll DM them tomorrow, and I tell them, no, call it out publicly.
Exactly.
It's a process thing, right? They wouldn't have said it if they didn't believe that it's good for process. If you the leader, if you know that it's bad for business, then call it out, so that there's going to be no ambiguity of whether or not they were right and whether or not you think you have a better idea. Now, maybe you're also wrong, but at the very least, then you need to have this discourse in front of the team to actually check if there's an experiment needed to figure out how to approach this question. If it's a branch, or if it's a it's a long-lived feature, or if you're trying to do strong-based development or continuous delivery into the team, which a lot of engineers struggle with because they don't call out bad behavior. Bad behavior in engineering processes would be tolerating way too much, sitting around PRs, not reviewing code, but also not improving process. There might be somebody who is silent on a meeting, and I tell them, look, well, call it out. Or maybe somebody talks too much, or maybe disrespects people in a meeting, and I said, call it out. And if they're shy about it, they will say, okay, I'll think about it, and I'll call it. I'll schedule a one-on-one, and I'll go talk to them about it. And I told them, no, that's just for negative stuff. That's just for really negative, private, sensitive, personal feedback, right? For the really bad stuff. But if there's just some small hoopla, of which there are a gazillion every day, just call it out. Call it out and correct them. Right? If you got a new trainee in the kitchen and they didn't wash their hands, tell them, hey, did you wash your hands? No? Okay, please go wash your hands. Right? You call it out immediately. We don't call We don't treat them like a snowflake and go and talk to them privately and pull them away, because then people think the worst, right? Like, you want to talk to them privately, they will have an even more visceral negative reaction because you drag them into private, because they think you're gonna fire them, right? So, but it's these little things that I don't know when it came to this, but some leaders are just too soft. They don't do
They are
the
too afraid.
actions. Sorry?
Afraid. They are afraid, not soft.
No,
Soft is
wouldn't.
the symptom of
I
that.
wouldn't. I wouldn't. I wouldn't attribute this to fear. It is not the typical fear response, right? So there is no somatic sort of
No, it's the
chest
fear of rejection.
gut.
So it is the
No,
fear of what will
hang on,
people think when
hang on.
I do that.
So I disagree that has to do with fear. I think that it is primarily coming from them being of the belief that it is of bad taste, right? So it is not so much that they are afraid that their employee will shout at them or freak out, but they seem to have this left-brained idea that there is some level of decorum necessary, and that there is a certain way of handling certain feedback, and that it is inappropriate to step in on the floor, on the workflow, on the engineering floor, and just correct behavior. And it is completely, from my perspective, at least from my experience, from what I can tell, it's completely evasive. It is completely analytical. It's like, it will be a bad move now to say it out now. It is calculated. It is premeditated. It is not a, be afraid, freeze up, and tense, and not say anything.
This is not what I say with fear.
But that's what I'm saying. To me, that I would have used the word afraid if I thought that was the case. It is complicated. It is individuated. There are some people who are just afraid of their team, especially if they have a relationship on the team with somebody who is agitating them, right? So somebody on the engineering team who is not a manager, who carries a lot of merit, let's say a lot of influence by merit. They might be the best solo engineer or the person with the oldest tenure, and they argue a lot, and then they are worried or afraid of that argument sparking again, right? So
this is not what I mean.
That's also not what I mean. That's where that would, let's say, creep up, where you're just annoyed or even disgusted by triggering that kind of exchange, and they don't know how to communicate with such a person.
But it is the inner resistance. It is not usually not or nothing directly in the team now. I think what I see with all the leaders I help, or I was sitting together with, or I was colleague with, or myself in the very beginning, was that 1,000 things running through your head and creating this diffusion. It creates this insecurity, and this insecurity basically paralyzes you, and that is a form of fear. It is a fear of making a decision. That is what I mean. It is the resistance to change in its essence, actually, and because every time you would do something now, it would cause a change. And that change is what I see in basically every human, in every little thing you do in life where you need to change something. That fear kicks in. Resistance to change is essentially a fear. And that is what I mean by fear. Not the anxiety you might have of a singular person. It is more what happens when you actually do this. Because then from now on, you always need to do it like this. It's like, this is a consequential thing. Do you actually know? And you don't know, so you are afraid. It is a little bit like the fallacy of choice. If you could do now multiple things, it produces fear to make actually a decision. It makes you hesitant, and this is what I see most often. And it stacks up over time, and then you have a collection of these things which you bury in mind all day long, and then you basically become, or you render unable to actually make anything anymore. So you decide. So even premeditation doesn't work anymore, because you premeditate but you don't execute. So you're always stuck at the last 10%. You never do the actual thing. You think about the thing, you decide for the thing, you don't do the thing. You think you should do that. You have discussed it with your peer or your CEO. You all agree, but you don't do it. And you say, yeah, we can do this. Yeah, let's do this in 3 months. It's a little bit like, postpone it into the future, because it's the same thing as not done. And that is what I personally see. That is what I need to work on basically constantly. Not only leaders, but already seniors who
seniors,
don't want,
tech leads,
who say, I don't like my manager, happens as well a lot.
and
it is the
and
very
that
same
is
thing.
that is one of the main reasons for people to quit. Just bad relationships with their C-suite, with their manager, with their report, with their skip. A lot of decisions come down to how empowered you feel, and it is the people above you who basically help you feel empowered, or by neglect or too much pressure, they can take that away or can create put you in a box that you then have to, fight out of, and that can be very taxing. What tech leads especially, so engineers that get promoted into a more leadership oriented position, the most common response that I see that tech leads or senior plus engineers want help with is that they're at the brink of quitting. They think, okay, nothing will change in this organization, so why should I bother? But I can't work like this. I don't want to work like this. I would like to go to an organization where they don't work like this. And instead of improving it, they're seeking to escape. They're seeking to run. They're sort of saying, okay, I came here, it was compatible, but now there's stuff I don't like. And I'm just going to reshuffle the deck and I will take my chances with the next organization. What most engineers in this position don't realize is that the situation is of their doing, right? So their conscious and unconscious biases have driven them to choose this kind of workplace. And it is unlikely that there's a significant change to how they chose the old one, the current position, and how they will choose the new one.
Yeah.
Without some fundamental action, without some key maturity events, some key fundamental behavior change, mindset change, a sort of identity shift, they will just retrace exactly the same steps. Why this is hard, though, is that when you go to a new job or a new company, or you found a new company as a founder, there is usually a honeymoon period. And especially engineers who pre-COVID job hopped a lot, they got used to staying in jobs in the honeymoon period. So they're not really situated mentally to think about long-term tenure in an organization. They always seek that honeymoon period, so they just keep skipping jobs, or they think that is normal, that honeymoon period of like limited responsibility and there's very little organizational friction, that is what they should seek, rather than seeking the challenge of going into an organization, seeing the friction and then working with it, removing the friction, helping people remove the friction. Because you can make a lot more change. You can have a lot more impact as a leader if you go in and you feel the friction and you confirm with others that they also feel the friction. Then you do something about the friction. That is the best kind of service that you can give to your team. But a lot of leaders feel powerless, so they're just ready to throw in the towel. Because when they get to the point where they can deal with the friction increases. It gets really hard before you implement a change, especially if you haven't built that belief into yourself yet, into your psyche, that it's worth it, that of course it will have a positive effect, right? It's like, you're a parent, I'm a parent, we know this, right? Like, so sometimes you just have to teach, provide discipline, or provide sometimes advice, sometimes frames, sometimes calm, sometimes emotional regulation, and sometimes you have to I'm stuttering on the D. And sometimes you have to discipline your children, right? But you're not doing it to punish them, you're doing it to teach them a lesson.
Frame.
You give them a frame and to help them figure
They
out
expect it,
why is this
basically.
happening.
They expect it. They take a look at you when they do something, how you react. And if you then
And then,
basically discipline them and they understand, okay, I've done something
Mhm.
wrong, as long as you don't overgo the line, right, and behave yourself while doing that, they don't see you as a bad person in that moment.
Of course, like discipline driven to the extreme could be considered abuse.
Yeah.
Same thing with same with. I can see the parallels with team management or cultural management in engineering companies where you tolerate bad behavior for way too long, and then there's this outburst on a presentation or a town hall meeting or a all hands meeting or a sprint planning or a planning meeting or a strategic meeting, and inevitably there's some heated debates going on or shouting or maybe just microaggressions. It's possible for most of the harm, for most of the pain to be communicated by silence or by deference, by saying, you know what, I don't care, I don't want to talk to you, like this is your problem, fix it.
Mhm.
You know, these kinds of microaggressions of, okay, there's something going on in engineering, fix it. Like I don't care, we tried everything, you do you. But then they still have this committee and they try to sort of veto certain decisions that they don't like, they might consider harsh. One of the things I used to do, and I used it as an exercise, and I evolved it since, but the most primitive sort of proto maturity event that I put in front of leaders was canceling sprints and deleting PRs. Um, in the sense that they were following a process that didn't serve them, and they said, well, we have this sprint planning and then there's the next sprint planning, and I can't make a huge shift now, and I need to wait until it finishes. And I told them, well, you're the guy in charge. You control the process. Cancel it. You know, if you think, you know, if you think deviating from the sprint would break the rules, then cancel the sprint. Cancel the sprint so the rules don't no longer apply. Right? You know, it's like having a referee on a soccer match. It's like, oh, somebody's injured, we need to carry them on, but there's no people allowed on the field. It's like, blow your whistle, cancel the game, and then you can go help and bring them to a hospital, right? Like, it's like, yes, we can follow the rules, but we can also interrupt the frame that enforces a certain set of rules and replace it with a different kind of frame that enforces different rules, right? So and I saw this a few weeks ago as well with another client who was struggling with introducing chunk-based development in their team. They kept telling me, we have this PR, and when there's this like huge PR, it requires approvals and yada yada yada. And I told them, well, ban PRs.
Mhm.
Like, don't try to change it. Just ban PRs. Just tell them no more PRs from now on. Like, stop trying to work up from the dysfunctional workflow. Just work from the other side. Work from it from the correct one. Just instead of creating a branch and then merging it, right? Because what was the problem? What was the problem? They had merge protections, right? They couldn't merge onto main without introducing a pull request. And I told them, well, just ban PRs and have everybody push to main. That way you don't need merge protections.
But in
Right.
reality, that people sit there when you have, let's say, ignored that for too long.
Mhm.
People simply ignore that
They
and
got
tell you then,
accustomed
I
to,
just
to
keep on
tolerating it.
because I don't really see you as a leadership person. That they say between the lines, and we sit here and just continue because we don't think that what you say is correct.
Mhm.
And maybe it's just an idea of you. It is really like your credibility as a leadership person in that moment is that low in that team that they don't even think that when you say something, it is like an order anymore. It is like,
Mhm. Mhm.
it is a suggestion, and we don't want. And if you're in that situation, even that doesn't really help anymore. That is, to be honest, that is where I help people.
Mhm.
It is where the leader is actually quite powerless in that moment.
One of the things regarding powerlessness that I see a lot is engineering leader or engineers, very very experienced engineers, who absorbed some kind of managerial power, That usually happens when a company restructures and the middle management layer shrinks. So if there was an EM and an agile coach and a tech lead and a director of engineering and a CTO, and now that two people from the middle management layer disappear, and now there's a lot more responsibility on the tech lead in a people management sense. And this can happen really quickly because you just suddenly absorb a bunch of responsibility without really having had the conversation about do you want the responsibility or do you not want it or who should have it. Sometimes the organization just grows or changes or mutates so quickly that a lot of behavior precedes conversation about expectations and framing and responsibilities. So you have to retroactively do them and figure out, okay, do you want me to do this or should I have done this or was that a problem? I would actually like to continue doing this or not continue doing this. I don't like that I was distracted from my primary strengths. Engineers will have different reactions to it, but one of the things I'm seeing a lot is the framing of they see this powerlessness frame come from the idea that they cannot ask anybody to make individual shifts in behavior. Everything has to be systematized first. Right? And an example would be, hey, we have 40 PRs open. What should we do? I had this example recently. And I asked them, who does it bother? Like, who had an allergic reaction to open PRs? Right? Who agreed with you that this is a bad idea? Oh, this other person. Okay, what did they do? Nothing. They just sent a message. Okay. So what do you want help with? And they immediately sought to this idea of, okay, what should we change in the process? I told them, nothing. And then we looked at the PRs, and 70% of the PRs were from two people. And we told them, okay, it's not a process problem. It's a two people problem. So we need to figure out, this is clearly a problem. We just need to figure out who should talk to this person, right? Is this potentially multiple management verticals? Is this somebody vibe coding and sort of intruding into the team? Is this some AI-assisted codex agent automation that just created too many PRs automatically, but there was some element of human control sort of passively going alongside there, and then it just exploded in output? So it just became this decision of, okay, like somebody controls these bots or somebody controls these PRs. Who will go talk to this person and tell them that, hey, this is bad. Please stop doing it. We don't even need a process change. Like, we don't need to automatically flag, prevent, block, pipeline this behavior. First, you go to the person and tell them, hey, what you're doing is not very helpful. You close 5 PRs, and then you open 5 more, and now we constantly have inventory. Please stop doing this. Right? Or at least just finish them one by one so that you do 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 instead of 5, and then there's a huge gap, and then 5, and then there's a huge gap, right? So you can just tell them to, hey, what you're doing is not sustainable. Stop doing it.
But even that is hard for the people to do. It is like, as soon as someone seems to be invested in something, and is a person who you as a leader think he or she has credibility, it is like you don't really want to say, I think we should stop it, because right in that moment, resistance kicks in again, and you have this idea of, oh, maybe he's right, maybe I'm wrong, so I need to think about that instead of just acting and waiting for the response of that person. Because if you talk to that person in that moment, you will get a response. Then, first of all, your ego is silent, your resistance is silent, and you are in a conversation. And then you can actually figure out, is that the best way or not? Because you have always the choice how you act and react in that moment, which means that you can go to the person and ask just questions about, why are you doing this?
Yes.
should we do this? What do you think? And just use the Socratic method or something else to get
Mhm.
to the point that this person is answering do the question by himself. And if you get to the conclusion that he's actually right, then you can still say, you know what, we continue doing that.
Mhm.
And we have that as a team discussion. Let's bring that to the team. So you can do that basically. But it is up to you. If you just stay there, you are afraid because you think you need to make a statement because you are the boss, then maybe that is one of the things. People are a little bit like the imposter syndrome issue with
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm good enough. You labeled that as the self-worth thing. Yes, self-worth comes from practice and progress. You need to do this. You need to get the feedback. You need to do something which is worth doing it, which is, where you see value in it, what you have done in order
Mhm.
to build that up. Because self-worth is nothing than a recurring pattern and a memory of patterns you have already done successful. And in order to do that, you need to do something, because every time you make a mistake, you can learn from this mistake and rephrase that as well as
Mhm.
something where you can be proud of and saying, I have done this and I actually succeeded. And that is how you build it up. And in that moment, you should never be afraid. If there is a moment when you are afraid to speak to a person you are supposed to lead, you have a severe issue. And if you cannot overcome that issue for multiple times in a row, you either should reconsider your job or seek help.
Mhm.
That you simply, first of all, you damage the team in that moment, that you have responsibility you don't take. So you either step back or you get help. There is nothing in between. And that is reality. So you can't just stay there and say, yeah, it's somehow my role. No, you are not in this role. You are just a leader in disguise. And that is something you need to be very honest about, because you will burn out on some point. The others will start to ignore
Mhm.
you, and you will never help them to become actually a good culture. That is the reason why so much isolation happens, because there's this natural building of groups or forming of groups, and
Mhm.
these groups form without your intention. But you are the person who is intended to create the intention of the mission, the vision of what this actually should look like. And when this grows and when this cultivates, it's like a garden. If you don't care
Mhm.
about your garden for 3 years, yeah, good luck going with a lawnmower there, right? It doesn't work anymore. You can't do that in 2 hours. You need to have a specialist and 2 weeks of time and a lot of money to fix that back to baseline. Yeah.
Regarding psychology, we had a comment on YouTube. Um, you don't actually have to invest too much into psychology, because the purpose the purpose of, we don't need psychology as a tool to then wield in conversation and explain to them what psychologically they're doing. Fundamentally, we just need to have enough muscle memory to respond that, hey, if there's bad behavior or if there's a change needed, then we do it immediately, right? So the the response to identifying and doing something about it is what is important, not how to do it correctly or how to even explain or analyze or reason
But
and
you speak
explain in
now from
words.
the survivor person, so you speak now from the veteran perspective how you should do it. But
Hmm.
if you're in the junior leadership perspective and you're afraid of everything, your words don't make sense to that
But
person.
the thing is, my first leadership role was, I got promoted and I didn't want it, right? So we had a team. We had two candidates, me and another two. We had a team of five, and it came down to me or another senior,
Hmm.
right? And it was basically, okay, who wants it? And neither of us wanted to lead the team, And then my leader basically framed it as, okay, like, do you want to follow his charge, or do I want him to follow my lead? And I was like, okay, I actually prefer if we did it my way. Like, if it comes down to that, then yes, I would prefer to do it my way. And then my leader's preference kicked in, and I was the choice. And then that created a whole bunch of conflict, right? Because now neither of us wanted to lead. Our conflict was that we won't recognize the other person's leadership, right? Like, there was some interpersonal conflict there that we didn't resolve. And now I was in this position where it was sold to me as, oh, just a little bit of extra work every every week, and it became another full-time job on top of my senior engineering responsibilities, right? And I didn't know how to handle that. So that was my first stint with it, right? So it's not to say that I did well in that first position, but it was more so about this idea that I felt it was expected of me to have everything figured out. So every time I didn't figure something out, I would ask for advice, but I didn't need advice, right? I didn't need the information of what should I do, even though that would have been helpful. But generally, I knew what I should have done, but I was holding back.
Yeah.
I had a general idea of what I should be doing, but then I didn't follow through on it because I constantly looked for sort of review over my actions, or I needed a little bit more confidence in doing the decision that I felt was right. And sometimes it was the wrong decision, or sometimes the delivery was clumsy, right? So we had that conversation earlier when we talked about if you see misbehavior with, let's say, trunk-based development or timelines or deadlines, yes, go stop it, but not literally go there and stop it and yell at the person to tell them to stop doing it. But, do it with tact. Go in, ask them, hey, can I give you some advice? Like, would you receive some advice? Would you listen to some of my advice regarding this and this and this if you want? Because then you can set the stage of seeking permission or seeking an invitation or seeking to know, to understand, to listen, whether your advice, whether the timing is correct, right? Because maybe they're agitated and like, nah, no, I need to solve this problem and then I can listen, right? So it is this idea that we also need to learn how to communicate effectively, not just why we should do it or what the correct solution is, right? So it's more about the interweaving of all the different disciplines rather than just focusing on psychology. If you over focus on psychology and you're super left-brained and an engineer, you'll just use psychology as a tool where you think that if you push the right buttons, you'll just be able to manipulate people into doing the right things without having hard conversations. And that's the wrong way about it.
I would even say that psychology in that moment isn't even the thing. What is psychology? It is an extremely large field which we haven't really understood as humans right now. So I think what would be closest is to understand what you do there, what your issues are, and try to find a way to actually move forward.
And when we say psychology, I think what we should agree on is behavioral science. So how people act at the workplace, not really psychology, not the academic study of it.
Yeah, exactly. But behavior, yes, I would boil it down to human condition because it's just the easiest thing because you can be sure about that. Everything else has to do with habits. You need to understand habits and need to take a lot of time understanding the habits of someone else to actually understand why the person is acting like this, and you are not a therapist. So I wouldn't do that. So human condition is the only thing which you have as well in another person. So take a look, is that person more or less afraid? Is this person indifferent about things? These kind of things are important indicators, but anyway, you need to move forward. And the most easiest thing is to just invert it. If you were the person on the other side, how you would have, you would like to be treated. Are you the person who want to get statements in front of the team that you are not good enough or something like that? Or you're doing something wrong or something like that? Or do you want to just ask a question in front of the team where you can shine and actually move the needle forward? So you have always the choice. This is what I mean by that. And you can always take a look into yourself, how you want to be treated, and then treat others like that as well, with the mission in mind, which means that you can say, guys, we need to bring this forward now. We can't just stay here and I involve you as long as we move forward.
Yeah.
But if we don't move forward, I need to make a decision. And if someone is not follow that decision, you are out after the second warning. That is the frame. So here's the ownership. I pass each and every one of you a little bit of ownership. Now take it and make it yours. But if you don't do it, I'll take a consequence out of that. That is the reality, what you need to go, where you need to go to. And that is the self-confidence you need to have. There is not much more to the actual practice of leadership. So leadership is not a field where you need to study 10 years before you can do that. Leadership is mainly human understanding based on the human condition. It is human relationships. So you need to understand human relationships and then do something with it, align that and do it. It's a discipline thing. So it all starts with yourself. And what I can give as well is, if we talk about psychology, never point a finger at someone or something. Always take a look at yourself, why this might be, or what is your part in the problem you see. And even if two people argue about something you had no doing in, and you are the leader person, ask yourself what you could have done better 2 weeks ago to not have this situation become a reality. And then you know what you can do in future to prevent these kind of things of happening, because this is where you have the power over. You can't change the past, you can't change this situation right now, but you can change the situation in the future, and you can help resolve that situation right now. And it is always this where you need to work. There is some form of psychology behind that, but it is more likely how to handle humans, how to act and react yourself in front of humans, take responsibility, and always start to think about yourself and get your emotion out of there. Because as soon as you let emotions in, you have actually lost already, especially when you have no self-worth. Because the emotions will always fight against you. Always. You can be 100% certain about that. Because if you are an emotional person, and that is one of the most crucial things when people talk about, you need to be a leader of empathy and be full of emotions and understand everyone, so that it's a great cuddle session. It is not. That is not what empathy means. Empathy means you can sense emotion and act based upon your intention. Emotion does not mean someone is crying, you need to cry as well. That is not emotion. That is not empathy. That is emotional breakdown. That is an issue. You are not capable of being a leader in that moment. You need to sense that there is a problem, and you need to act intentionally to resolve that situation anyway. And these kind of things are important. And this is basically a 101, if you like it. One, you should learn yourself, but it makes sense to have someone discussing those kind of things with you. Because what I really like, so how to actually solve this, how we solve this is, we make a form of shared joint premeditatio thing, where we sit together and I ask that leader in the morning, what are you going to do today? And there will be this person, and you need to be pretty honest about that as a mentee. You really need to say, I'm afraid of that person. I'm afraid of that situation. I'm afraid that I'm not good enough for that. And then we play that through. That's a form of negative visualization, not manifestation, visualization. So we imagine what can go wrong. We talk about that. We talk about possible solutions, even though the solutions might not be the correct ones. But as soon as you hit the situation, as soon as you get this into the situation, when the mentor is not with the mentee recognizes that pattern, and there is no emotional reaction anymore, because it was already in the morning. So that's done. Ego, it's not interested in doing that again. And you can act with intention and actually make a decision. That is called premeditatio malorum. This is basically an ancient method of doing that. If we talk about psychology, it is a psychology effect you do to yourself. You don't need to understand the psychology behind it. Just do it. It works. It's a little bit like that. Yeah.
A lot of very experienced engineers who seek help with leadership, management, influence, like just working with their team, introducing changes to their processes. To them, it's usually systemic change or process change, but really it's about talking to other people. We have a question on Substack, by the way, I just noticed.
I see.
So many engineers who seek help with this they don't know how to give lasting, impactful, rewarding feedback, positive reinforcement, positive feedback. So they lean way too much on using the stick. They lean way too much in corrective behavior and criticism. And what this can lead to is toxicity in the workplace if that is the only extreme that is being used in public discourse. So an example would be your team struggles to adopt testing or continuous integration, or you're just way too slow responding to product feedback and you just complain constantly that there's too many bugs. And an example of doing this badly would be all of the feedback mechanism is in sprint planning and pull request comments. Right? It is purely all stick. This is wrong, that is wrong, this needs to be fixed, this is wrong, etc. So it is way too corrective. And why, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Dennis, then how do I tell them that to improve? Right? Should I just roll it out to the customer? It's going to be even worse. Well, the problem is that it creates this incentive where you get to feel powerful as the leader by pointing out what everybody else is doing wrong, and then you belittle them, and then you make them feel weak and powerless, and you get rewarded for that. And that is a situation that you should never put yourself into as a leader. Right? You should be able to seek rewarding behavior. You should say, that was really good. This was really good. Would you like some feedback? This was really good. I like that. This was really well handled. So that you then train them to take in that little, cherry on top and get a little bit of reward, and then some feedback. Early on in my career, pull requests and code reviews was the primary feedback mechanism that I was exposed to. And feedback mechanism for everything, for behavior, for coding, for design, for interaction, for customer feedback, for career feedback, because that was sort of the most rigid and black and white on paper sort of tool. We didn't transcribe and record conversations back then, so it was quite a clumsy and primitive tool. But a lot of engineers, I think nowadays, engineers who have 10-15 years of experience are coming from that kind of school of thinking, that is in some way helpful. But really, what you should be focusing on is to call out when there's nothing positive to praise, right? So that is what we should be focusing on. I had a situation this week where somebody gave me a 4,000 line PR and they wanted my advice, and I gave them one.
Take a look at it and push.
And I gave them one, right? And 3 days later, they were, Dennis, when will you finish your review? And I told them, why didn't you merge it? And they said, well, you only gave me one comment, right? And I told them, yes, I gave you one comment. You seemed like you took all this time to build the PR. Now it's too late. It's too late. Like, it's a too large batch. I can't review everything. I gave you one piece of advice that seemed to be most impactful. Just act on that. Oh, but I don't have time for that. So that's why I gave you one comment. And then I pulled them aside and I told them, look, I know that you would like it to be thoroughly reviewed, and then a large PR should have a large amount of comments. But I want us to have a relationship where it is your responsibility to give me a small PR and get a comment, and then give me another small PR, and then give me a comment, and then give me another small PR, and then I will give you a comment, and we can talk about it that way, so that then I know that you're receptive for architecture advice or design advice before you build most of it, right? But if you build most of it wrong, then all the tools left at my disposal are criticism. We're not designing it anymore. Then I would just be, right? Because design discussions are helpful because you have a discussion before you build it. But if I'm having a design discussion after you built it, then I'm not only redesigning it, but I'm also implicitly criticizing what you have built. And at that point, I don't want to be exposed anymore to that level of negativity, right? So I just tell them, look, this is good. This was the most impactful that I see. That's why I commented on it. Everything else, please include me earlier in the process by making the PR smaller. right? You give me one large PR, I will give you one comment. You give me 5 small ones, I will give you 5. If you
But
want to
that
be
is
smart.
already how you should be as a leader, not how you stand in front of a big obstacle. This is not how you think. Normally, the people who are afraid of, they basically sit all day long in front of that review and try to make a good review instead of changing that you actually have a review process. That is what I see. And
Mhm.
it's a little bit like they want to shine because they think in that moment, oh, I don't have self-worth, which is a credibility problem. So I
Mhm.
can build up credibility by doing a good review now and showing that I'm still the IC here, right?
Mhm.
Which is wrong.
Yes, because it puts you on the critical path. You as a leader should not be on the critical path. And if you want to show a good example of leadership, you should also expect that you should just treat every engineer that as if they will be the future leader, especially your most senior people. So that you should then always expect them to behave as, look, I'm not going to put myself in a critical path because you're responsible. And when you're reviewing somebody else's code who's more junior than you, I would expect the same behavior from you. Don't put yourself in a critical path. Don't fix the junior engineer's code, because then you're coding it. Then you make yourself responsible. You take it away from them.
Mm-hmm.
But that makes them feel powerless, and they will not want to seek. They will not want to seek.
But how to
Feedback from.
translate that to a person, in your opinion? Just asking you how you handle these kind of situations, because that is now wisdom. And that person in that moment doesn't need wisdom, it needs
Mhm.
practical advice, how to actually do it by him or herself in
That's
that
a good
moment when it
question.
happens.
So let's, for the perspective of the leader, how do you coach a leader who is a junior leader into becoming a better leader? The
90% of the people.
Which is 90% of people, of course. But how to instill change in them? I would say they you need to sort of convince them or slowly nurture this idea that they're not responsible. That they're accountable for the culture, but they're not responsible for the work. Right? So they are accountable for making sure the work happens, and they mustn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it is. Well, what I would frame it as is that if I'm now coaching a leader how they should talk to their engineers, what I would be focusing on is stop giving them the solutions. Right? Like stop telling them what to do. I also won't tell you what to do. Right? So we also model it in the coaching itself. And I ask them, well, if you're not allowed to code and they have to code, how do we solve this problem? Because in your mind, you're not prepared to do the right decision because you're like, okay, I will tell them. And then when I get annoyed, I will tell them a little bit more intensely. And then when I get really annoyed, you'll go do it yourself, right? Like the leader will just step in and then just do it, right? Because in their mind, that's their backup plan. If the junior screws up, the junior leader will step in and fix it, because that is probably the incentive structure that they grew out of. That was the dysfunction that they had to survive in a previous workplace. So they are now the survival of that, and that survival has brought a lot of positives, but also a bad habit, a bad mindset, a bad framing for these kinds of situations. And I usually do this exercise with them, and it's not pretty. Sometimes these kind of discussions lead to, well, if they want to do it, I need to fire them. It's like, yes, if they want to do it, you need to fire them. So how do we prevent them from being fired?
Exactly, that's your job.
Right?
But you need to fire them if they don't. So
Yes.
that's a little bit
Yes.
the frame where we play in.
Right? Because in their head, it's like, oh, I need to give them another chance while there's still time on the deadline. It's like, no, we can't spend the entire deadline for you to teach a lesson, because you also have a lesson here. You also have a lesson to the others in the organization to make sure that the person working on the project is competent. And if they're not competent, they need to have support. If they're not competent and they don't have the support, well, then you have a problem. You need to fire them, free up the budget, and hire somebody who is competent.
To get back to the psychology aspect of what can give you a little bit of confidence in making a decision as a leader, especially as a junior leader, just imagine that the person sitting there is not your master, is not some kind of a holy person. That person was taking the responsibility of a contract, and you are responsible for that person and the contract. Normally you are, which
Mhm.
means that in that very moment, if that person is not fulfilling the contract, harming it or doesn't bring it forward in any way, which is it meant to be actually like that, then you need to do something about that. That person is violating the contract. It is not okay. It is not you cannot be indifferent about that. If you do, you do something wrong. So that should be a preposition in that moment, which means that this is on your side in that moment. If you don't do it, it is against you. As simple as that. Because you have both contracts with the same company, which means that you have both an obligation towards that company. And if that obligation is not important to one of you, and you would even say no by violating this obligation, the person on each side who said that need to go. That is the basic thing, because in that moment you harm all the others around you who need to make salary to feed a family and those kind of things. If everyone would basically handle like that, you wouldn't have a team and you wouldn't have a company. It would be absolute utter chaos. And that is the reason why I'm speaking like that. This has nothing to do with you need to be polite to people. If someone is not willing to do the very, very, very basic contractual stuff, you should go.
And I think people, junior leaders, they usually don't see themselves as being the responsible party for pipping people and firing people, right? And they usually do this thing where, so what they struggle with mentally is this idea that they are there to criticize, but they don't have the authority to fire. So they will just try to make sure that they were promoted to a certain level and that the juniors or the other seniors who are working on their team, that they are working how they would work. So that there is this sort of propagation happening of I have healthy habits, that's why I was promoted, so I will enforce my healthy habits onto the team. And that is a very naive approach. Such a leader isn't necessarily going to be guaranteed to be successful because they need to be lucky. There's an element of chance of, well, my style and this leader's style and this leader's conditioning and biases need to be compatible with their teams. And sometimes there aren't. And sometimes there are multiple ways of handling a situation correctly.
Yep.
So junior leaders often find themselves in this situation where they correct and overcorrect in the sense that everything they personally wouldn't do, they criticize as being incorrectly handled, up until the point where they start tolerating some bad behavior if they themselves would also tolerate it. Right? So it's like, okay, we don't do trunk-based development. We tried, it doesn't work. And I keep using trunk-based development, but we can think about it from this perspective of we roll out a feature and it didn't have enough unit tests, or it didn't have any unit tests. And the leader might in their head think, okay, well, I would also sometimes not do that. And then they say, okay, that's a soft constraint and I won't enforce it. But it's possible that the leader doesn't know how to write tests, but that doesn't mean that they can't expect that from their team. A leader should also always expect that their team will often outgrow them, that they will become more competent. Like, that's why they're the leader, right? Because they're not in the thick of it anymore. So obviously, why would they have to be the smartest person in the room? But a lot of leaders want to be the smartest person in the room, so they won't ask their team, to their detriment, to do things that they personally don't know how to do. And that leaves a lot of gaps in what the team is capable of, because
how to lose that habit. That's the question. How shall a leader use that habit? It's a very important thing.
How would you go about it? You're leading the question, so I think you have a story.
No, I try to imply the Socratic method that you actually do that, not me. But anyway, I can do that as well.
No, okay, but I can do it as well. I had a situation recently, and the question was, hey, we're using a new tool. The tool is forcing us to do event sourcing, and we're not experienced with event sourcing, and how there are sometimes determinism checks that fail in the pipeline. Like, we deploy something and it is not backward compatible in a very mathematically correct kind of way. So it is a very high rigor, very high level of discipline required in some parts of the code base. And the leader in that team or in that sort of squad, I spoke to them, and they asked me, well, how should I enforce it? Because I don't know how to solve the problem, right? And I told them, well, you don't need to solve the problem. You just need to tell your best engineer to go and solve the problem. But you need to tell them to do only that, and then to explain it to everybody else so they understand. But that also means that you need to tell them, look, I don't know how to solve this problem, but you're my best engineer. I can't do this without you. Right? To have a very honest conversation with them of, this is something new. We need to figure this out. Would you be interested in figuring it out? You're my best engineer, and you're the person who is currently working on it. And when you figure it out, please present it to us, because I would also like to learn. Right? And if you need help, I will gladly help so that we can learn faster, if you think that's helpful. Right? Like, that would be a good example of how to instill that kind of change if you're still pretty close and if it's novel technology, etc. But sometimes it's habitual. Sometimes it isn't as easy as reading documentation and using a new tool differently for the first time. Sometimes it is this sort of more resistance to, I don't want to write tests, or I don't want to think about a problem so deeply because it might not give us positive ROI. Or architecture discussions. People love thinking long term, needlessly over engineering architecture discussions. There, it can be a little bit more sticky, because you do have to talk to the engineer or the individual. So to get rid of this habit of not doing it themselves, or not sort of using their own defensiveness as a backup mechanism, or their own perceived limitations and knowledge as a backup mechanism to constrain their team, one of the best approaches that I found to do is to take away the committee, right? To take away this idea that, oh, if there's an impossible problem, we'll have a meeting about it until it resolves itself, and allow one person to own the problem and nothing else, right? So that there's no distractions. Allow one person to go deep and then present their findings to us, rather than the leader having to, have final say. That would be one of the strongest, sort of most relationship building focused approaches that I know that work well in the field, especially work well on high.
Okay, that is an approach, but the question is, how does the leader actually understands this and not resist to actually do that? I would like to add something.
I think you're trying to focus this on resistance. I think
no, I focused on understanding. To have the reasoning about that, but the resistance is the first step, and then you need to still get to the reasoning about that is actually a good thing to do, because all you say is correct methods, but the leaders don't do that, and there is a gap in between, and I try to bridge the gap for the people sitting in front of that and try to get an understanding how to actually get there. And for me, it's like you have, let's imagine you have 110% of rating in your team. You are the highest, the best person, and you get promoted because you are the best person in your team, the best IC. So everyone else is 90 to 100%, and you are 110% because you have practiced more than everyone else. Now you are a leader. You don't practice anymore for 1 year, and you get like to 105% because you are not that practiced anymore. But the others, they keep up. They are now 100 or 110%. They were where you are. So you have done everything right, because you are not rated anymore by typing code into an editor, but by how that team grows, because you have the experience. If you still try to rate yourself with how good you are in comparison to the ICs, you actually don't understand how you should rate yourself and take a look in self-reflection.
Using your analogy, I think fundamentally you said how to drop the habit. Well, first you need to understand what it is that you need to drop. Like what is the
This is what I said just right now.
No, not you, but that person.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Like that person has to make a mental shift of, one of my old core beliefs helped me at some point, and now I need to accept that they're actually preventing me from moving forward.
Exactly that.
And usually the belief like a proto belief, like not just one concrete one, like for trunk based development, for example, or testing. But I can do a trunk based development example if you want in a bit. Do we have a question? No.
Actually, but I don't have that much time anymore. So
okay. So fundamentally, the belief or the sort of family, the group of beliefs that you need to sort of wrestle with personally first as a new leader is this idea that keeping score is not a positive, right? So your job is not to, because you won because somebody kept score and then you were number one. So for you to survive up until this point, keeping score was a positive. But then when you're in the leadership position, you need to get away from mindset framings where you can be on top. Like you need to drop this mentality that I need to keep score and I as the leader need to be on the top of the food chain. That is one of the core fundamental beliefs that junior leaders need to adopt to get out of this I want to quit trap, because they still want to be the best. They get promoted because they want to be the best. So if they keep carrying this belief forward, well, when they're managing a group of 10 juniors, they still need to feel like they're the best. And they are then incentivized, and they then have this conflict of interest where they can remain the best if they belittle people on their team and prevent them from growing. So the fundamental thing that you need to sort of let go of as a junior leader is to take yourself off of that hierarchy where you fundamentally used to keep score, and ideally not even keep score for your own engineers to compare them with each other, but rather compare them to growth potentials that you see in them. I saw potential in Steve, and I now saw what Steve is capable of, and on an average day, Steve gave me 40% of what Steve is capable of. Like that is the only amount of keeping score that we would want in a team, and that we don't need the who's my best engineer, and obviously I as the leader I'm the best engineer in this team, right? Like that is the fundamental belief that you need to let go, that you need to let go of, and that's very difficult because that is everything that has brought you up to this point, to this level of success, and it is the primary thing that is preventing you from growing further, right? So it has helped you up until this point, and now you need to unlearn it to make room for new things. But fundamentally, it is that kind of belief of I need to be the best architect, or I need to be the best leader, I need to be the best engineer, I need to be the best person in Go, I need to be the best person in Python, I need to be the best person who understands our dynamics.
Can continue to do so. So what one of the things is, that's all true. We basically said the same. The point is that there are some, especially team leads on that level, who, when they get into the situation that they realize that, but they are already in the leadership role, that they don't really want to change into the direction, they should change back to IC. That is my personal opinion.
You mean that if they fundamentally disagree with this sort of surrender, that they should then abdicate the leadership position?
Because that's a different type of job. So you cannot be satisfied anymore with a coding role. So you won't be satisfied by that because it is not a coding role anymore. It is now managing coders. That is actually what you do. And it is not do it yourself. And if you do that you basically step in and do the coding again, and you are the person reviewing code still, then you are not a leadership person. What you do in that moment is you are still a senior, like a cornerstone senior, but you could have to just go become staff engineer or something like that. It's much better for you suited than actually be a manager. You can stay in IC. You can be a freelancer, a contractor, a staff engineer, who's
architect, a consultant.
Exactly.
Yes, there's a whole bunch of things that you can do. Yeah,
where you can still code and do things.
With that level of drive of wanting to keep score, wanting to be the best, right? And you're just selling your expertise rather than...
Exactly. I had today a conversation with a freelancer who is a very successful freelancer earning good money in Germany. And this is exactly that point. I told him that he is always, when he is in a company, he is always outside of the scope of the actual leader of the team he's working with, because contractors and freelancers and coaches are all outside of this bubble, because they are a little bit like everyone seeing them as a as a timely occasion that happens. It's just a thing that will be removed anyway.
Yep.
So that you can be much more self-confident in that moment. You actually need to level up your game. You need to level up your self-worth based on your actual hands-on craft, not on leadership skills or something like that. You just need to sell yourself well and can be that one. And you can probably earn more than in a job, especially in Europe. So there are a lot of opportunities. Don't stay in a leadership role and block the entire process if you don't want to do leadership stuff. Maybe heavy is a crown. That's the topic of today. If it's too heavy for you, well, maybe you should wear a helmet and ride for the king.
But I would always advise you accepted the promotion in the first place, or something drew you to that position. So giving up or abdicating it or quitting without having learned a lesson, you are very likely to repeat it. So when you feel the biggest resistance that, okay, I'm done with this, I want to quit, or it's time for something else, or it's time for a career change, or it's time for a 6-month vacation, I always, in that moment, it's easier to learn how to manage the symptoms and go deeper and try to find the root cause and learn something from it. It's like, why do I feel like this when I get presented with this situation? How could I prevent it in the future? So that you can grow from the situation. Otherwise, you'll just get stuck. I saw a bunch of engineers, I was in a generation in a university where I had 250 classmates. And most of those classmates didn't graduate. And most of them got stuck at a senior level because they just got stuck ping-ponging themselves into this position of they grow, they get authority, they get promoted, too much, let's go back to IC work. They grow, they get too much authority, it's too much, I don't like it, they go back to senior IC work. And they just keep ping-ponging, not realizing that they are repeating the same patterns, the same sort of survival mechanism of, when it gets too much, we need to pull back, rather than asking themselves and allowing themselves to go through that experience and say, okay, this is now something I'm not good at. How can I get better at it? Why do I want to pull away? What am I avoiding? How can I face that thing that I'm avoiding without crashing out dramatically? Because most of these engineers, they don't seek feedback. They don't seek support. They don't ask for help. So they are driving the car to the cliff, closer to the cliff's edge, closer. And then when the car is past the edge, 2 tires hanging in the air, then they're like picking up their phone, hey, I'm at the edge of the cliff, what should I do? And we have to then zoom out and ask ourselves, why do you always call me only after you're already past the edge of the cliff and about to fall down? What has happened so that you didn't call for support, ask for feedback, introspect, journal, meditate before on that entire journey? Why did it take the most amount of escalation and pain for us to start having this conversation? That is the most important part. That we are wrapping up, I'm aware, but if you take anything from this episode, it's like, don't wait until the pain is 10 out of 10 to make change. If you're a junior leader and you're mildly annoyed by microaggressions and the pain level is 2 out of 10 on some key thing that keeps repeating and it's not just a one-off, tackle it immediately. Take everything seriously as if your life depends on it, because it does. It has to do with your stress levels. It will help you regulate, and it will help you avoid these like a big once or nothing, big lifetime crisis moments where you're at the edge of the cliff and then you want to quit, or I don't know.
When the human was on hunt, basically in the Stone Age, it was the situation when you weren't treating a situation as a life important thing, because that's when you basically die. That's when you make the mistakes. And always be intentional. As the more intentional you are, the less likely it is that you make mistakes. And just be disciplined. So don't, be awake, have good time and rest before the work and after the work. Then you can be fresh in the morning, right?
Yes.
And make the right decisions and actually have the power. Be a fit person. Don't be utterly unfit person doesn't really help you at all with that kind of job, because the stress levels that's one of the reasons you see me in my videos always running around in a mountain. That's one of the reasons, because I need it. I have extremely stressful life because I don't only have my own company, my own things, my own family, and my mentee. I have everything together at the same time. There are so many things going through my head at the same time. And you as a leader, the more people you have, the more things you have the same. Because especially when you do that the first time, there could be something as well, how to actually stay fit as a tech lead could be an interesting thing as well, because most tech leads I personally know are not very fit at all. That's the issue of the tech-driven, often gamer type of developers. Most somehow, not everyone. That's a over exaggeration, but most of the people I was working with were actually gamer at the same time, and that has some negative side effects on that entire journey as well, even though you feel more connected with most of your engineers because most of them are gamers. But the issue is that this isn't really helpful for your mental health as well at the same moment. You can do that in a way, but very often it's not, because you will, as an IC, maybe, right? You can be distraction after work. These kind of things actually can help. But as a leader, where you will take these thoughts with you, into
you
your
need to
home,
be
basically.
you need to be physically fit and sleep well to be able to emotionally regulate yourself during the workday.
And you won't sleep well if you can't do that. So it is basically a cycle. It's a dependency cycle, and that is something which is extremely important as well. Oftentimes it is because of that as well, or it plays a crucial role that you cannot make a thing. You do it tomorrow because you're fucking tired, right?
And even if you say, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm regulating myself," you might be regulating yourself into abstinence. Like, you might just be communicating in microaggressions because you're blocking or suppressing what needs to be sort of expressed. So you got to be very self-conscious about that, because it might be happening. It might just be slipping out of your grasp, and it's best to get feedback from that, from other people. It's like, hey, how do you think we're doing on this level of conversation? Or not just have a topic. One of the advices I usually give leaders is, don't just immediately jump to the conversation, but also zoom out one level and ask them, hey, how do you like having this kind of conversation with me? Like, not only how can we solve the problem, but hey, how do you enjoy this conversation? How could we improve the conversation? Like, is it helpful that we're talking about it this way? Or would you prefer to just solve it yourself and then I asynchronously chime in? Or would you rather we do it somehow else, right? Also analyze how the conversation is being done, how the process is being done, in addition to solving the problem. That goes a long way. If you just keep this in mind, this duality, it will help you stay on top of things. Because sometimes you just completely checked out and either emotional or irrational or tired, and you want to solve the problem and you're just going to give a bad solution instead of saying, you know what, I can't concentrate on this right now. Try solving it alone, and I will check in with you tomorrow. I need some rest, right? So that also ties into regulation, is knowing when to take a break and to not continue the conversation when you're too checked out, even if there's a deadline, even if there's an issue. Because a lot of software engineering premise is built on this fake emergencies idea of, oh, production is done, it's an emergency. Oh, this is an emergency, that is an emergency. No, emergencies, real emergencies. And thank you, Jonathan Stark, for today's newsletter. Real emergencies are, the water pipe has burst, we're leaking, I need to step away from the meeting and
it's a whole different feeling, a real emergency.
Exactly.
Everyone is on alert, right?
A real emergency, there is smoke in the kitchen, I need to step away from this meeting, handle it, and then come back to the meeting and say, sorry, this and this happened, but now I'm too agitated to even, contribute to this meeting. Sorry, I will join tomorrow. You guys figure it out if you have to without me, right? That is a real emergency. Everything else is just people being irrational or trying to push your buttons to get to more of your collaboration. Because ultimately, when people push your buttons and they agitate you to get your attention, they just seek your attention because either they really want to work with you, and you were avoiding them, or they need your help. and they're afraid to ask for help, so they push help, or they make it a process problem.
I need to go. I have 2 minutes.
Adrian, the other Adrian from Substack, thank you so much for being very active on chat. Rich and Rajiv and Karunya, thank you for joining us live today. I sent a few of you some LinkedIn connections. I would like to stay in touch. If you have any follow-up questions, if you want to continue one-on-one, or maybe you have like a actual concrete story that you might not want to mention publicly, feel free to contact one of us if you want to continue the conversation. And thanks for being with us today. We'll continue these kinds of topics. We made a recent shift about focusing on this, basically our coaching, our work with engineering leaders, with engineers who want to improve their just humanity, not just their craft. This is on territory for us. It's a recent shift, and expect more of it.
Thanks a lot,